Hello, everyone, and welcome to the kickoff of our second season of Three Opinions, an ongoing conversation about life, thought, and practice, and how Judaism weaves itself through it all. The season is going to look a little different than last season because we want to tackle some bigger questions and wrestle with those questions in a responsible but really thoughtful and powerful way. And this first conversation, I think, should really help pave the way for that conversation because it's about our most important resource on this planet, our children, about the world they are seeing, about the world they're not seeing right now, and about our responsibility in hearing them, understanding them, and acting on their very real fears, concerns, and frustrations. My guest today is Dr. Brooke Weingarden. Brooke serves on our board at Congregation Shaare Tzedek and is not only a great friend and a great leader in our community, but also is board certified by the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. She earned her medical degree from Toro College of Osteopathic Medicine and Surgery in Vallejo, California, completed residency at Henry Ford Hospital and fellowship at Wayne State University. She received her master's in public health from Nova Southeastern University in Davie, Florida. And her areas of specialization include psychiatric evaluations and management of children and adolescents. This includes early childhood evaluations, disruptive behavior disorders, mood disorders, anxiety, thought disorders, and ADHD. So, Brooke, before we get started, I just want to give everyone some quick background information because we started brainstorming this conversation after all of us saw the riots unfolding on our TV screens on January 6th. And I think we realized that we weren't the only ones watching what was happening unfold that day. And a place for a long time that has stood as a symbol of our combined American goals and values and the voice of the American people became that day a scene of violence, of hate, and of the dark reality of conspiracy theories and propaganda. So this is where we start today, still in recovery, and I think for many of us still in shock of what happened that day and what has happened or hasn't happened since. And we're going to use that as our launch pad because there are a lot of issues that we need to address coming from this experience, and specifically when it comes to the mental health of our children. So I'm going to hand it over to you first to just give some initial thoughts, and then we can go from there.
I think that sounds great. Now, there's a lot of ground to cover, and I'm sure we'll just touch on many of these things. I think the first thing that we need to remember is that our kids want to feel safe, and if we're not feeling safe, they may or may not be feeling safe. Kids are pretty intuitive, whether they realize it or not, and whether we realize it or not. If we, they may not have even seen what's going on in the news, but if they're feeling tension, if they're feeling a change in, the environment in the home, if they're feeling something change, then they're going to be unsettled. And so unless there is some sort of conversation to address that, that sort of potentiates further anxiety and unrest. I think that we also have to remember that kids are not just tiny adults. And as much as we may want to think that they are, they go through all different ages and stages, which, a lot of times the pediatrician will bring that up as far as growth and development, but that also applies to how they process things mentally, emotionally, conceptually, and throughout the world. So the way that they're going to understand things will be different based on how old they are, how mature they are, and that may affect the way that we need to manage this and deal with this with them. It's funny, I saw a meme the other day, and I really wanted to bring this up to you because I felt like it really sort of brought a lot of this, my point sort of brought it home. It was, I don't know if you saw that new movie Soul by, I think it's Pixar, which I haven't seen either, but it's supposed to be very deep about, what happens to the soul. And they talk in that movie about where the soul is before it joins the body. So it's like the before. And they're sitting and watching the movie with a young child, and the young child says, "I remember that place." And everybody in the room turns white, and they're like, "Oh my God, you do?" And that's, as an adult perception of what the kid must be thinking. And the kid goes, yeah, it was in the commercial for the movie. So, I mean, I think that's such an important point to remember, that what we are thinking is not exactly what our children are thinking. So sometimes we might choose to overshare things that maybe they're not ready for, or maybe that's not even what they're thinking about. So the first thing that I would say, with whether it's, the violence, whether it's politics, whether it's any of this, is to ask them. Because they may still be in the trailer of the movie and not quite where everybody else thinks that they're processing things. So that's really important. Remember where your child is as far as, how they're processing information. If your child may have had glimpse of what's going on TV, and their biggest concern may be, why do they look angry? Or what's going on? This is loud and it's getting in the way of my show. Or, that man had a sign and there was a swear word on it. That's upsetting to me. Why are people posting swear words? And then other kids may say, well, I'm learning more about this, and I'm seeing this, and it's making me feel really unsafe. And and that will take the direction a little bit differently, but we don't know unless we take the lead of our child, and then you can kind of take it from there. But the one thing we don't want to do is ignore it, because if you ignore it, if you speak about it in privacy, if you don't talk about it, they're still going to feel that something is scary, and they're not going to know what it is, which makes it like 100 times more scary.
For sure. So let's take a couple steps back, because I think that where you started and where you ended is really crucial, because especially if we're talking about this idea of maturity, not just for our kids, but for ourselves. I think many of us as parents and as adults in general are scared of having those conversations, or don't look forward to them. So we wait until our kids say something or ask. Mm-hmm. Instead of perceiving the emotions or perceiving the fact that we're carrying a different type of energy than we normally do, which undoubtedly I have a 15-month-old and I have to keep myself in check all the time, because, I've never in my recent memory have I felt so much stress, anger, frustration, fear, all of these different things that I for sure carry around, that he perceives in ways that I don't know that I'm putting out. So how do we first recognize the changes within ourselves, and then do it in a way where we can talk to our kids, but not overwhelm them, like you said, of talking to them like they're us?
Right. So, I mean, that's obviously a huge ordeal to do. And I think you're right. The first step is to figure out within ourselves how we feel, and to be okay with that. And to say, like, hey, things are happening right now and I'm not okay with it. I'm feeling unrest. I'm feeling unsettled. I'm feeling, like this is making me feel not safe. Sitting with that for a minute, recognizing how you're feeling, and then maybe you turn and say, have you heard about things that may have been going on? Like, what are you talking about at school? What are you talking about with your friends? Have you noticed that, mom or dad or somebody may be a little more stressed out? There seems to be a lot going on in this world. What do you know? What do you feel? And being okay with saying to your child, some things are going on and it's making me feel sad, or it's making me feel worried, or I'm having these feelings. Because if it's okay for mom or dad to have these feelings, it's definitely okay for you as a child to have feelings. And let's talk about it, because we're going to normalize this right now so we can all feel good and feel safe and protected and, together about it.
Great. Yeah, sounds so easy.
Oh, it's so not easy. It's not easy. And if you're struggling to sort of like process things yourself, and if you feel like that's affecting your own functioning, like don't ever hesitate to reach out to somebody, whether it's somebody to talk to, a professional, a friend, clergy, to be able to process your feelings even before, wanting to address it, because you may not be ready. But don't wait too long, because your child can tell. Like if you're having a tough day and you're getting snippy, like you may find that they're going to snip right back at you, because they feel that. They're going to like bounce right off of that energy. Our kids are little emotional sponges, and, it's good to be honest with them so that you can share the sponge and bring it out, instead of having them bear all this weight and feel like all these scary things are happening that they don't understand.
For sure. And I think that COVID has worked in two ways, right? It's either made people who don't open up um, double down and hold on to it even tighter.
Right.
But I think for different organizations and different places and different families, I think are starting to realize that there's no way of going through what we're going through right now without having those moments of vulnerability and sharing.
Absolutely.
We're trying to do it as at the synagogue too, of being able to stick around after Shabbat morning services and just check in. Not any kind of programming in that way, just to check in, because
Mm-hmm.
so many of us are taught from an early age to not open up and to bottle it up, and especially in times like this, we can't. I mean,
Well, especially in times like this, for a number of reasons. I think for number one is because it's important that although we're in our own little pods of our homes, that we feel like we're not alone. And the same with our children, that they feel like they're not alone, because we're not. And obviously everybody's going through things a little bit differently, but we're all still here and available to check in. And so seeing that there's real people out there doing things is important. I think it's also important because there are so many things that are going on, as far as like things that are said that either are really important to know or that make absolutely no sense, or that may be complete like narishkeit and delusions, but it's important to discuss those things, because the further that we're in our little bunkers here, like some of those things, it's much easier for people to be like, well, I don't know, maybe that is what's happening, and so we have to have reality checks now and then too. And the more you talk to people, the more you have the comfort of knowing at least the people in your lives are safe right now. The people in your school is safe. Your friends are safe. The people, that you need to be around you are there, and they don't, and unless they know that you need them to be there, like, having that extra reassurance. And even, those kids that are in school and knowing that like your school does X, Y, and Z to keep you safe. These things are scary, and this is what we do about it. This is a hard thing that we're going through, but this is how we're going to deal with it. And this is how we're going to keep you safe. Things that we see on TV might look scary, but that's not right here. And if there's a place where that is happening, this is how we avoid it. This is how we can stay safe.
oh, that's great. Yeah, I think we overthink that sometimes, and try to do all these different things maybe behind the scenes, instead of just saying right up front, here's the list of the things that we're doing to make sure that we're all okay.
Mhm. And I'm sure at my house I probably do it ad nauseum, to the point where like my daughter's like, okay, enough, I know what we're doing already, but at least she knows, And so, okay, annoy your children a little bit, but at least they know that the things that you're doing are to keep them safe, and that that's one thing they're not worrying about.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that's I'm thinking about, and I'm thinking about for myself in these last few months too, is one of the big messages that we received in rabbinical school when we were doing our clinical pastoral education, our CPE training for chaplaincy or whatever it might be for pastoral care, was it is our job to comfort people as clergy members, and never
Mhm.
to have our congregants comfort us, right? And that makes sense. We have our own outlets of finding comfort in people to talk to when we need to, but it seems to me, when I look at our kids right now, I feel so stressed by the idea that I think some of these kids are taking care of us more than we're taking care of them right now. And I
Mhm.
can see some of our kids just being like, you guys have lost your minds. Like, you guys are the kids right now, and we're the adults in some ways. We know how
Right.
to wear our masks. We know how to go to school. We know how to do these things. And you guys are arguing about these different things and literally coming to blows and violence over these
Mhm.
things that are different issues. Like, it feels sometimes like they're taking care of us. And I think that's problematic too. And I wonder how we can figure out how to make that work.
So that's absolutely happening. I mean, I'm seeing kids every single day that, kids in general are much more stressed now than, this is more crisis than I've seen in a while. Maybe not for the same reasons that we're having stress, but everybody's, to a higher level of anxiety than they have been. But, I'm seeing kids that are just so distraught because, my parents don't believe in this, or they, are refusing to wear a mask, or they're going to do this anyways. And I'm just so worried about them. And, they're going and traveling, and how could they do that when I know this is going on? And it's really hard for kids because they are at least the younger ones are at a stage where they're taught something by their teachers, by their mentors, by, their doctors, and they're going to take that for what it is. And they're going to say, they told me to do this to keep safe, and that's what I'm going to do. And why aren't you doing that? And I think that is a very big problem. And I mean, maybe to remind us that our kids are watching and that that's why it's more important for us to follow the rules and try to remember why we're doing this. I mean, it's really hard when, kids and their parents have different views on some of these things, because it certainly does cause conflict. I think in some settings, and depending on the age and openness of the family members, it could be a setting to have a conversation to, I guess, get to know each other better about this and to help be on more of a level playing field. I think in other situations, people are not quite willing to come to a common ground. And I think for the child, it's important to have somebody that they can feel that they can at least confide in, whether it's their doctor or their therapist or their teacher or a friend, where they feel like they're still getting support from somebody that shares those views with them in a safe way, because that is a huge problem. And I think for some of those people, it's okay just to say, you're right, that's really upsetting and it's really hard and it's okay to feel that way. But like, you also have to find important ways of functioning. I think that's a really hard thing. I think at least, and that's more in families when like the differences of opinions and people, you're right, when adults are acting like kids and needing the comfort. I think something else though that has come from at least kids viewing a little bit of what's happening on TV is opening, at least for like the high school kids and maybe middle school, opening a conversation about why those people are feeling angry and what types of people are acting this way and feeling this way, and what does that mean, and what is social injustice, what is a racial disparity, what's going on in the world, what is hate and why. And obviously for much older kids, this is an important reason. But I know that even in the schools, kids are talking about, Martin Luther King, and they talk about the Holocaust, and at least I know that, at some schools they do. And so even to the degree of what the kids know about it, some of the young, elementary school kids, well, what did you learn in school about this? And what do you think about that? And so it's not going to be the same depth of conversation as you would maybe with your high school or college student. But the kids are pretty smart. There's still thoughts about it. And even the youngest kids may have probably the wisest of thoughts about it.
Totally. I've quickly learned that as a rabbi with kids in theology, they say the most incredibly wise things about God and about Judaism and about life. And we often dismiss it as kind of like kids say the darndest things instead of being like, wow, that's really profound and really beautiful.
But they're not complicated with all these other thoughts. It's very straightforward and concrete to exactly what they're feeling versus like, all the different things that may complicate something like this. So, I think that, we may learn lessons from them as well, which, is important. And I think it's good for us to check in every so often about that and about how they're responding to things versus maybe they've got the right idea.
Totally. So that's part of my question too, is being able to check in with them and learn from their insights. Because one of the things that I think, regardless of what news channel you listen to or radio channel or whatever, there's a cliche that is like ubiquitous right now of people coming on and pundits saying, this is the most divided I've ever seen us in my lifetime. When you think about it, for our kids, they've seen this their entire lives. If you're post 9/11 kids, you've seen political division, you've seen politicians being shot, attacked, pipe bombs being sent to people. You've seen political violence and separation in this country for as long as you know.
Right.
And how do we get out of the mindset of this is such crazy times we're living in, this isn't who we are, and instead of realizing that for our kids, this is what they know, this is the entire reality that they've seen.
Right. And a little sad that for them, it may even be more normalized that there is so much of that. I think that is an important reminder. But I think it's also important for us to remember, some of us do remember a time when it wasn't quite like this, although throughout history, we know that things come up. And going through things that are tough, going through a storm, oftentimes we take that and we learn from it. And so the next conversation is what can we learn? What can we do? And how can we grow? What are something I ask my patients every single day at the end of each visit, like, what is something that you would like to see different? What do you still wish was better? And so instead of focusing on, oh my gosh, like this is terrible, it's the worst it's ever been, but this is all I know, what could be better? What could be different? What can we learn from the behaviors, from, I don't like this and this and this, these things are inappropriate, these things are mean, these things are hateful, what would be better? And focusing on that, right now you're safe, right now your loved ones are safe. These people might be struggling over there, but what are some things that we can do to contribute to that? So I know like many kids over the quarantine have done lots of different like Tikkun Olam projects and, raising money for, lemonade stands to donate or making different things, pillows for animal shelters. And I think that's huge and that's awesome because that gives you a sense of feeling proactive in a world that right now feels unrest and unsettled. So finding ways of giving and doing good, I think is huge. Making sure that if there are people you need to process things with, you have that available, whether it is a teacher, a parent, a friend, or a therapist or a doctor. And just sort of normalizing that talking about those feelings are appropriate and okay. And, we've got our baseline feelings. And if things are going too much one way or another, to know that extra support is there. But knowing that we're learning from this. Good things could come from this. And look, there are good things that we're trying to do even in today's world and in today's politics. And we're trying here, The day of the riots, I know that it's very different now than it was that day, but we saw a glimpse of seeing like a group of people coming together and saying, none of us are okay with what just happened. We are all condemning this. We are still going to work together, whether or not these other people are opposing what we're doing, to move forward and count the electoral votes and do what we're here to do as our job as Americans in this democracy, that this is our plan right now. And that's not going to stop us. We're coming together. So in that moment, I felt this is so beautiful. Like, there is this storm, but like people are still coming together and doing what they need to do. Today might be a little different looking than, each day is different, but, maybe there are little lessons that we are learning along the way. And I think the most important thing, even with those things, as everybody's been just like glued to the news, probably more than they have in a while, is keeping an open conversation and verbalizing their thoughts and feelings. And it's probably to the point already where it's boring for kids to see, and that's okay. Like, let's bore them until they feel comfortable and safe. I'd rather than, that than having fear and, unsettle and unrest.
Totally. So, I mean, I found myself getting cynical even just listening to that last part of what you were saying. So I need to go back and say, I want to hear some of what the kids are saying that they're hopeful for and that they want to change. Because it, like I just said, it's so easy to say like, well, it was great for that one night and now it feels like we've taken steps backwards. But I think we do need to recalibrate and remember that there are things that we're working on and things that in our country we are unified about. And that we need to be working on. So what are some of the things that the kids are saying that they're hopeful for, that they want to see change and that they're working to change?
I mean, many of the kids that, they're much more short-sighted than we are. And, when some kids, their goal is, I want to be in school. I want to see my friends. Yeah. Like, when have you heard kids begging to be physically in a school building, which like that's kind of a win already. But, they're like, I want to be in school. I want to see my friends. I want to be able to go to summer camp. I wish that I could go to bed earlier and get some better sleep. I wish that I could play better in soccer or, perform better, even though they're understanding that things feel unsettled and that they're like, yes, like I'm talking to you, I'm way more stressed. I have a lot of pressure. The news is freaking me out. My parents are freaking me out. Like I'm just feeling very out of control. But what do you really want to see better? Well, I want to be able to get out of my house more. I want to be able to socialize. I want to feel more connected to people. I think that the disconnect probably makes some of the scary things feel a lot more scary. And so I think that that's an important key thing where everybody is saying that they really just want to find a way to connect. And then the next thing I tell every single person is go outside. We live in Michigan. Get over it. Bundle up. Get outside.
Yeah. Yeah. And crucial. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I was just thinking that, I lost my train of thought for a second, that, the idea of looking at our goals and our hopes as baby steps and like little bite-sized chunks that we can do is such a good message for us to learn from our kids, because I think that part of the frustration, part of the anger, part of the fear on everyone's mind is that we have these big carved out ideas of what needs to happen in like kind of a utopian idea, right? Talking about we need to get rid of systemic racism. Great. Absolutely, we need to, but that can't happen overnight. And to think that we are failing if it doesn't happen overnight gives us anxiety. It makes us depressed, makes us frustrated, instead of saying, how do we carve out some knowledge? How do we impact one community? How do we impact the conversations we're having with our family members or our friends or our community?
That's the start. I mean, that's got to be a start, because if you don't start anywhere, like none of those things will happen. You know, we have all these big things, you know, racism and hate and divide in parties and global warming and the babies at the border and all these things. And you start listing them off and it's like, who's not going to have a panic attack?
Right.
They're all too big for anyone. And so, you know, you have to break it down. And because obviously, like none of us are lawmakers, we're not changing all of those things. You know, there are things that we can do in our home. There are things we can do in our communities that, you know, can give us a sense of being proactive and helping. But, and that's a start. But as people are doing, you know, that's where it comes from. And getting out of the house, like the kids say, go to school, you know, just get outside, be in contact with people, participate in something is a start. And yeah, there are some very heavy things out there and they're all really, really important. And they're enough to, you know, put anybody like, you know, under the covers for a long time. But we don't have the power as one person all by ourselves to like, you know, snap our fingers and make it all better. And so we have to find ways of easing into that because it's just unmanageable otherwise.
And I don't think it's even like an excuse, right? We're not trying to take the burden off, just saying that, you know, all these things that are worth pursuing, because I think we can agree that they all are worth pursuing,
Absolutely.
right? But they're crippling if we don't take a smaller chunk, right? If we don't, if we can't see right in front of us and we see the end goal, then like you said, we're going to bury ourselves under the covers and just be so sad and angry that we can't do anything.
Right.
One of the things that I really have been pressing for myself and for people I talk to is we have to stop watching cable news. We can get our news from their great podcasts that I can recommend that give you a breakdown of what's been happening for 10 minutes in the morning instead of listening to talking heads fill us with more emotion and more anger and more mistrust.
Well, right, because you can, you know, watch multiple different stations and everybody sounds relatively, you know, intelligent and valid, and it's very confusing and it's all very dramatic. And a lot of times they're talking about the same thing over and over. It's almost like, you know, when there's a hurricane or a tornado and you see like the Weather Channel on there, you can watch it for an entire day and nothing has happened yet, but every minute feels like it's breaking news and you just get sucked in and it's so not good for you.
Totally. And I think that we get caught up in that. And then, like you said, going back to the very first thing we were talking about, our kids feel that. They see that. They see that we watched the news for an hour and we learned 2 minutes worth of information, and then 58 minutes worth of people talking about that information in charged ways. And then after that,
using our time so much better.
For sure, to be outside and to even like take whatever that information was, and if it makes you upset or frustrated, good, like then you have 58 minutes to go do something
about it.
Yeah.
Right. Or come up with a plan of how, what can we do, and what makes you feel like you're being proactive, and what more do you need to learn? But like, it's certainly not from, all of these news channels. And
Right.
I think that is a big piece of it. There's so much dramatic effect because they, it's still a company. It still needs ratings. It still needs all of that stuff. And we have to remember that. And usually it's like when I get collateral information from a child and their parent, and maybe even another parent, you take each piece with a grain of salt, and then it's usually somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And you have to know enough to know that that's what the case is. And many kids and many people that are seeing that on TV, they get so pulled in that they may not know to step back a minute and remember that it's not always exactly as it seems.
Right. Very good point. So here's the last thing I want to ask you before just kind of taking some last minute advice before we say goodbye. But I'd be remiss in my duty as a rabbi to not talk about this, because one of the things that I've heard numerous people say after the riots is that what was jarring for a lot of these politicians who were, locked in their offices or sheltering in place, is that their young staffers knew exactly what to do because they've grown up with active shooter drills and all these things. And it was second nature to them to think about it in a way of, okay, this is of course what we need to do. We need to be quiet. We need to barricade the doors. Here are the different things that we need to remember. And how do we go forward in our understanding that kids know this so well, and the fact that they know it so well is really sad, and to not make these things become our normal that we move on from, but chip away at it and make sure that we don't have to bring up generations of people who know how to shelter in place because it's their active part of their life.
I don't think there's one right or wrong answer. And I think as adults, we all feel really brokenhearted that our kids do know those things. And, it is really sad and it feels really awful, but it almost seems to me, and, like the young staffers that knew what to do, and like, oh, how awful that they have to know that. But I don't think that they felt like, maybe they didn't feel scared in the moment. Maybe they just felt prepared. Maybe they felt, they've normalized that sometimes emergencies happen. We have fire drills and we have tornado drills in school. And while the idea of active shooter drill sounds just heinous, we don't have so many fires. We don't have so many tornadoes, but, there was one when I was in middle school, I remember, and we all knew what to do and we just kind of did it. There is a little more, adrenaline when you feel like it's the real thing, but you also feel a little bit safer because you know what to do. So on one hand, it's terrifying. You don't want to think of somebody that's, out of control and loose and active shooter. And I hate that that's even something that our kids need to know about, because we want to shelter and protect them forever. And we don't want them to ever find anything scary. And we just want to like protect them and not ever have them deal with anything bad in the world. But the truth is, those kids were prepared.
Right.
And they knew what to do. And, I think the same thing goes with, going outside and protecting yourself from COVID, and going outside and protecting yourself from people that have different views as you. Is, being safe is being prepared and knowing what to expect and knowing what to do about it and how to keep yourself safe. And even though they are really scary concepts, once you have those ideas, like having a plan, if there's a house fire, like this is what we're going to do and this is where we're going to go. Like, gosh, I never want to have that. It's heartbreaking. But if God forbid that happened, you're prepared.
Right.
And so it gives you a leg up, and it gives you a little more control in a situation that feels very out of control.
Great. So I think that brings us kind of full circle in this idea of, so I just want to make sure that we reinforce this idea that that planning is good, and having a plan, and having and especially when it comes to big things and little things, right? So being prepared for natural disasters or domestic disasters, whatever they are, is it's good to be prepared, but also being prepared emotionally and mentally, and to be able to have those conversations about the things that are coming up is equally crucial, right? Just as we would have this is what we physically do in this situation, to have a checklist and the different things to do mentally and emotionally when we need to process, and especially to check in with our kids to see how they're processing during these times.
Right. And to
Sounds
say,
really
I
good.
feel this, you might feel something too. Let's talk about it and take their lead, remembering that their concept of things is going to be different based on how old they are. And, you know, going up to an 8-year-old and saying, you know, you must be so, terrified of the loss of our democracy and the hatred, and they'd be going, what are you talking about? Versus why are people, saying bad words on TV? Well, let's talk about that and how it makes you feel too, because take it from where they are and allow them to have whatever feeling they're having, but whatever it is going to help them feel more in control and prepared in a world that feels kind of out of control.
Beautiful. I love it. Okay. I'm going to hand it over to you. Any last things that you want to let us know? Anything that we should kind of keep in the top of our minds as we continue on in this strange chapter of our lives right now?
Gosh, I think it's just important to, be kind to yourselves. If you're having a day when you're feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling stressed, and just know that that's okay right now. Everybody is having those days. We can't be in full-on emergency crisis mode for an entire year. Many of us are helpers in the community, and we're healers, and we're used to, working in an emergency, but not one that's continuing for so long. And so it's important to be kind to yourself and to take care of yourself and make sure that you're sleeping and eating and all of those intuitive things that sometimes are not so common sense when you're in the midst of it. People are struggling with their mood and their attention and school and work and lots of things, and it's okay if you need a break. You have to allow yourself to worry about, taking care of yourself in order to take care of your family. Put on your oxygen mask first so that you can take care of those that you want to protect and care for. And, we're just going to keep at this. We have to be safe and be prepared and hopefully, continue towards a direction of health and science and vaccines and normalcy. I'm getting my second vaccine on Saturday, so we're very excited, and just to be smart.
Awesome. I just really want to highlight that last part too, because I think part of our culture in America is this culture of martyrdom, that we feel like we're not being a good parent or a good friend or a good whatever unless we're sleep deprived, unless we're not eating right, unless we're doing all these things that are actually really bad for us. But we need to pay attention to how to take care of ourselves, to do all the things that you said, and to use the resources that are available to us. So, reach out to Brooke, reach out to me, reach out to people in your lives that you can talk to, because no one can go through what we're going through right now and not talk about it with someone or share.
Not one person.
Not a single person. And we're excited that you're getting your second vax. That's awesome. And yeah, here's to hope, right? And turning a corner, and we're going to make it through this. And our kids are going to be great, and they're going to continue to teach us a lot of things too, because we need their help, because
Absolutely.
Sometimes they're the adults and we're the kids.
Sometimes they are.
But this has been really, really great and really invaluable information.
Anytime.
We really appreciate it. So thank you very much. And again, I'll put your contact information when we stream this too, so people can be in touch. And again, just thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.